Well, thank you so much for each of you joining in this morning to talk about how microdosing is helpful to mental health. I always like to start with a topic though, because the big thing when it comes to psilocybin microdosing is why do we care? Why do we care that we have access to psilocybin? Why do we care that microdosing is a tool that can be used now? What is it that we're actually trying to achieve? And the number one reason that we care is because of how our brain treats us and the way that we think. Thought is the complicating factor in all of our lives. And there's a lot of information that comes from outside of us that is put into our minds on a daily basis. And so sometimes I like to describe our brain as a cave that people just go and holler these ideas into. Hey, here's an idea for you. Here's a belief system for you. Here is a holiday that you're supposed to feel a certain way about or celebrate in a certain way. Here's a relationship that's supposed to have a certain meaning to it. And we absorb all that information and we let all these ideas kind of bounce around in our head without any real clear reference points often. And that's not because we are not intelligent and not because we don't care, but because we haven't always taken time to really think about our thoughts themselves. We absorb information, it filters through the belief systems and the default mode network for that clinical explanation of where in the brain all that information sorts through. And that comes from all of the things that have been handed to us in the past, our experiences, the ideas, the way we're raised, the culture that we're raised in. And so through all those filters, then the thoughts that are bouncing around inside the cave of our brain have meaning attached to them. And often that meaning, well, always initially, that meaning is something that has been handed to us as well. Here's what this is supposed to mean to you. Or we say a word and we automatically have a definition attached to it. Oh, that makes me feel happy. That makes me feel sad. It makes me feel worried. And just that predicate aspect of it makes me feel is a reminder that feelings and emotions themselves are also based on thought and based on definitions. The body's physiological response to things is based on the amount of power or the interpretation of the idea itself that we're processing. And unfortunately, now in modern culture and in most cultures across the world, we take that feeling and then make a determination about it. So a thought precipitates a feeling, which precipitates a behavior. But that behavior, again, is rooted in how do I feel about it? What is it that this is doing to me or making me respond by? When we can look more at those ideas of the thoughts and the feelings themselves, then we take away some of that power and start to question some of those definitions. Why is it that I'm just going to pick a holiday, even though right now, for the sake of the recording, we're actually in March, I'm going to pick Valentine's Day because that wasn't very long ago, back in February. And the idea of Valentine's Day within the United States, anyway, has a lot of pressure attached to it. If you're not in a relationship, then you're kind of feeling crappy because you're not in a relationship. If you're in a relationship, then there's a lot of expectation that's attached to the day or the idea or the moment or the expectation of it. Or you've decided you're just not going to worry about said holiday and try and write it off and pretend that every store you go into isn't decorated in pink and red and reminding you should care. Or it brings up a memory of a relationship that didn't go the way that you wanted it to, and now there's all kinds of ideas and feelings and emotions attached to that. That's just one example of one day and one holiday that comes around every single year. So how often are we doing this on a daily basis in our lives where we have all sorts of things that are dropped in on us? From the way someone responds to us at the grocery store, to other drivers out on the road, to colleagues at work, to family members that we hold certain expectations with. All of these ideas about how people should be responding to us and how we should be responding to them are based in old belief systems, things that have been handed off to us that we don't pause to think about. This is where the complicating factor of our lives comes in. Again, back to that idea of thought. Everything comes from a thought or from a concept. And so when we look at microdosing and how it's helpful, it's giving us an opportunity to quiet down those belief systems, quiet down those ideas that often just pop in and pop out and the emotional responses that come from that. and choose how we want to respond. Actually, hold on to it objectively and look at these thoughts and these ideas and choose how we want to respond to them. So by quieting that default mode network, again, default mode, it's very self-referential. What do I think about me? What does this mean about me? Reducing that blood flow to the amygdala, again, not being in that fight or flight or fear-based way of thinking. And then enhancing and stimulating the prefrontal cortex for that executive functioning of how do I want to respond to this? Does this mean anything about me? Or is this just an old way of thinking and believing and perceiving? And I don't have to continue doing that. So kind of put out a big idea. I'd love to hear from those of you that are on group today what that brings up for you. And if you're new to microdosing, maybe what some of those goals are or what you're just starting to notice. And if you've been microdosing for a while, what you've noticed in those shifts for you.
I can speak to that.
Okay.
First, thank you for describing it so thoroughly. Um, it's kind of wild. I've microdosed a few times, and you're describing the experience that I've had. That it's like there has become a separation between. It's like I can watch the thoughts arise, the habitual thoughts and the habitual even emotional patterns arise, and it's like I could go there, but I could also just like, oh, watch it.
Mhm.
And this is quite a different experience than even in meditation, where I feel like I'm observing those things, but still from a sense of sort of identifying as it's like a thought-based sense of identification that I didn't really realize I had until I didn't have it. And the microdosing um, gave me that experience of, oh, oh, interesting. This is what it's like. And the way you describe it in the video course and in your book as one's natural self,
Mhm.
um, that's what that feels like. And it's so tangible, actual, real. It feels, um, yeah, sorry to go on and on. It just feels so, it's so surprising. It's quite different than a thought-based sense of identity.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. How do you feel like in starting to recognize those things, where, if you have any specific um, references that come to mind where that has helped you to respond differently to something than maybe how you would have responded previously to it?
Yes. So I have some a host of health issues up right now: reflux, vertigo, sciatica, and it's a lot to have at once.
Mhm.
And so during the microdosing, during like when I'm on the microdose, or like when I have just taken it in the morning, I did this on Wednesday. Um, I just felt good, and I guess I wasn't really thinking about all these things. And then later, as the mm, later on in the day, I started sort of having thoughts about them again, and I could I could see the habitual tendency to start to be like, oh, feel down and feel kind of defeated, overwhelmed, these sorts of things. And I saw that as, oh, that's just a way to respond to that. It's just a habitual way to respond to it. It reminded me of, oh, that's how my mother responded to everything. That's how my father, et cetera. It's like it reminded me. I could just see so clearly how it was just a way. And I thought also, like, it's like if I had been I thought about if I'd had if people who have amnesia, it's like they forget about like all these structures of what it means to be me, these thought structures. They're just gone. Or what if I was born a different person? Like all these patterns wouldn't be me, they wouldn't be mine. So it's just so obvious that it's received, as you say, it's artificial. So yeah,
Yeah, it's
very,
inherited.
very it's inherited. It's a social inheritance. And I could feel how the biology of my body plays a role in that, a tendency towards anxiety. But again, the which came first, the thoughts or the anxiety? I don't know. Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate hearing your description of it and what you're noticing. And one thing, especially in mentioning physical pain as well, give yourself permission to dose a couple times throughout the day if that's something that you do find helpful to you. Often for people that are dealing with pain, whether it's lupus or fibromyalgia or just, general pain from other things, sciatica, that's definitely something I've suffered with in the past and understand the significance of that. How it literally will stop you in motion when it fires sometimes. But being able to microdose a couple times throughout the day for individuals that have fibromyalgia or lupus or some of those stronger, all day pain things, we have had clients who have found benefit in even dosing 5 or 6 times throughout the day, every couple hours, just a really, really small microdose. Because remember, the neurological system runs throughout the entire body. So we have that mental health component to it of what is pain? Where is this pain coming from? What does it mean to me? Which is kind of part of what you're describing. But then also we have that physiological component of those pain receptors anticipating pain or anticipating relief. When we look at the opiates and pain medications that people often become accustomed to using to try and alleviate it, the body starts to anticipate that. So with the neuroplasticity aspect of psilocybin, it is creating new neural connections and strengthening the connections that are there. So we have worked with individuals who have had significant benefit in pain reduction across microdosing time. So just to kind of add that to what you were sharing, if you are finding again that it starts to wear off, as we'll kind of say, even though it is a healing modality, half-life of psilocin is 2 hours and 43 minutes. So it is something metabolizes relatively quickly. So whether we're dealing with kind of a stronger physical pain or a stronger mental pain, treatment-resistant depression, severe anxiety, things like that, dosing a couple times throughout the day can bring some additional benefit while that healing is happening. And then you'll find as time goes on that you'll be able to drop that back and there will be less need or usage of the psilocybin microdosing. So,
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I wasn't aware of that possibility. So I will keep that in mind.
yep. Just don't dose after 6 p.m. If you are wanting to, make sure you go to sleep by around 9 or 10. Remembering
Okay.
we are
Okay.
stimulating that prefrontal cortex and those serotonin receptors. So you won't be angry about being awake, but you might be awake longer than you want to if you dose too late or too much too late. So, but thank you for sharing that. For others of you on group, what has kind of come to mind in thinking about thought itself and how we respond to it and where those ideas come from?
For me, I haven't put much thought into my thought, if that makes sense. I'm so new to this, but it's so interesting just listening to you and what we're accustomed to, and what I just think it's natural when it's not natural to feel or think certain ways. I too have struggled with vertigo, like Melanie. I haven't lately. So I didn't even think about, and again, it's because I'm so new. I didn't even think about those benefits. Um, my first day was Thursday, and I took a scoopful. I felt so elated. I felt like I was floating a little bit, however, still functioning. And then yesterday, I told you I just had this extreme anxiety. So I'm trying really hard not to think about what I'm feeling until at the end of the day. I think you mentioned that in one of the videos, because I don't want to it almost becomes psychosomatic. I don't want it to snowball and have it become worse or feel like it's going to get worse, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. We can certainly think ourselves into a very crazy mindset, a non-clinical use of the word crazy there, but a
Mhm.
cyclical mindset of round and round of, what am I feeling? What am I noticing? Should I be concerned about this? What if it's not working? What if it doesn't work? What if nothing ever works? We just kind of go round and round into those dark holes of ideas sometimes. So, did you microdose today?
I did.
And what have you noticed kind of today since we talked a little bit yesterday?
I felt great. So I put it in my coffee and you suggested just taking half of a scoop, which I did, and then tomorrow a full scoop. I felt great after I took it with my coffee. Probably I get up pretty early, so it was probably 6 a.m. And then I don't take my supplements. I worked out, I walked my dog. I don't take my supplements until I eat, which was probably 9:30. And then I felt really, really tired.
Hmm.
And maybe a little anxious again. So I don't know if I'm making this up that it has to do with my supplements. You said most likely not. Um, there are times that I feel um, a sense of dizziness, like if I turn quickly. And then I did worry yesterday about vertigo.
Mhm.
Um, so yes, I feel good.
Okay,
I'm journaling how I'm feeling, but I don't do that until the end of the day.
perfect. Yeah, it's so consider maybe for the next few days just sticking with that little half a scoop. Because
Okay.
sometimes some of the things that we start to notice that what I'll call, things that we're not looking for, maybe a headache or tiredness, would indicate a little bit too high of a dose.
Okay.
Sometimes it's the body adjusting. That's why we can't say, oh, it's always this or it's always that,
Right.
because everybody's body's a little bit different. So sometimes it is just the body adjusting a little bit to something new because this is something new that's being added. But at the same time, we do want to pay attention to those things just because that's how we kind of measure what the benefits are. So headaches or tiredness, my typical recommendation is back the dose off a little bit. Take it going from 0 to 0.025 of a gram is still an increase. Everybody's brain is different. It's not that you're not going to get the benefits if, say, your dose is 0.025 of a gram. You are going to get the same benefits. That's just what the dose is that works for your brain. Whereas somebody else might need a half a gram to even a full gram to get those exact same benefits that you get at 0.025. That's just different brains responding in different ways. And that's why the key really is noticing what are the benefits that I'm noticing for me. Am I noticing that my brain's a little bit quieter? Am I noticing I'm able to be a little bit more objective with what I'm thinking about? Um, and to your point, again, that's that reminder of reflecting at the end of the day. We notice things throughout the day, but trying to kind of notice it and then put it on the shelf. Okay, I'm going to notice that. That's why there's a chart included with, for whether an individual has the book or they use the video series and download the microdosing tracking chart. That's why that chart is there because it is important that we pay attention to the things that we are noticing. That's how we know to make adjustments. And we will notice different things over time. So as you continue being consistent, even now with just that little half a scoop or 0.025 of a gram, then that's where you are. You might decide that a little bit more is more helpful to you at some point. That again is learning and understanding how your brain responds to psilocybin. And that's really that significant part of getting started with microdosing. That is one of the hardest parts to really create an understanding around because we all start microdosing with an expectation of some sort. We've heard things about it, or people that we know have shared things about it, or we've read research, or just the idea of trying something new, or having been on medications and wanting to do something different. There's always an expectation attached to it to some degree. And for some people, the expectation is I'm going to feel a certain way. If I have severe depression, I'm going to feel happier. That's not always the case. Oftentimes, because again, happiness is just a momentary fleeting feeling anyway, what is found with depression is that it's fewer negative thoughts. And I'm not saying putting depression onto your conversation because that's not necessarily where you're at, but just as an example, if the expectation is I'm going to feel happier, that's an inappropriate expectation. A more appropriate expectation is I want to have fewer negative thoughts. I want to be more aware of how my thoughts are impacting me and my day and the things around me and what I'm noticing. So that's where having that chart and kind of noticing what am I noticing with sleep and clarity and anxiety and mood, all of those play a part in how we experience life on a daily basis. So it is completely appropriate to just stick with a really low dose, let your body kind of settle into it, continue to measure those benefits for you, and then decide, okay, now that I've kind of settled into understanding how this is currently impacting me on a daily basis, do I want to increase it a little bit and see what I notice a little differently there? Because there can be a discomfort in starting microdosing. And we have some past groups that we've discussed this, but I think it's helpful to touch on, and I definitely touch on it in the series, the video series, and the book too. That discomfort comes from the recognition that we have allowed a lot of things to impact us that we weren't aware of. So, kind of like Melanie was sharing a little while ago, we start to become aware of, wow, this negativity that I'm holding on to, or this perspective I have on things was given to me by a parent or a religious belief system or an institutionalized idea, a political information that's been put out there for a substantial amount of time. This isn't what I really think. This isn't what I want to hold on to. It's not how I want to respond. And then we can kind of get to a little bit of that anger portion of, why have I let that happen? I can't believe that I've let all these things impact me and it's not even what I want. And so we go through a little bit of this cycle of recognizing these thoughts and behaviors, and that's uncomfortable because we like to believe that we are very autonomous and we have full control. My ideas are my ideas, my beliefs are my beliefs. I mean, we have bumper stickers on our car and t-shirts we wear and signs we hold and flags we put in our yards and all these things to say, these are my ideas and my beliefs. But when we start to recognize that a lot of that has just been inherited in some aspect, that can become really irritating to our our intelligent brains that feel so autonomous. And so that discomfort is something that we do need to work through sometimes in recognizing, okay, this is information that's been handed to me. How do I want to filter it? What do I want to do with it? Being angry about it doesn't help because that doesn't change anything. But the discomfort and sitting in the discomfort and be willing to go through that part is what's helpful. It is uncomfortable to sit with a tightly held belief system and question it. That's nobody likes to do that because it feels very against something that we've identified as a part of us. But when we give ourselves permission to do that, if we go forward and decide, this is something that's really important to me, we're going to hold it completely differently. I know it's something that's important to me. It's aligned with what I want for my life instead of, oh, I've inherited it and been told this is important, and so now it's important. So, so I think I went down a little bit of a tangent there, Becky, but
No, it's okay. Thank you so much. And thank
yeah.
you for the explanation of it being uncomfortable
Mhm.
and feeling that discomfort, especially since Chad had started it a couple of weeks ago and I was expecting what he was
Yes.
going through. And I appreciate that reassurance.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, you mentioned a headache. I have that headache.
Mhm.
Uh, so thank you for that. And thank you for allowing me to feel okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that headache starting out is just something to go through. As long as the headache is subsiding in about 10 minutes or so, then that's something that will eventually go away.
Mhm.
If the headache is staying, drop that dose down even a little bit more. Maybe for you, that would mean dosing it that little half a scoop every other day. You give yourself permission to try what you want to try and be
Okay.
curious with it and find what's helpful to you. There's a lot of research about how psilocybin is helpful for migraines and for cluster headaches, and that research is excellent and valuable. And I certainly know people who have found significant benefit in reducing the amount of migraines they have and the severity of the migraines by microdosing. However, what I will say to that is do not microdose if you have a headache. It doesn't work that way. It is not a Tylenol or an ibuprofen or an Excedrin, when it comes to having a headache. So again, pay attention to your body and how you're responding. Also, increasing water intake if you're noticing the headache, because it is a little bit of a vasodilator. So, making sure that that water intake is there. Yeah, so listen to your body and give yourself permission to have some curiosity around it. And definitely stay connected to the team and to groups and letting us know how it's going for you. We value questions. That's how we learn also.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Other thoughts or ideas?
I just, this was a great group. Thank you. I don't really have too much. I just wanted to comment on Melanie. I think the idea of amnesia would be so neat almost. And I'm just thinking that would make a great movie. You know, where we get amnesia and then we're able to, I guess it's almost like that book. There is a book, there's a woman who experienced a stroke and then was able to come back from that. And I'm interested in reading that her story, but it would be almost freeing because you're like, okay, I have a clean slate. But there are a lot of conditionings that happen, and especially in society, we're very influenced heavily, and it's everywhere, and it's hard to escape. So being able to turn off the TV, being able to, so, okay, so microdosing not past 6. Okay, that's a tip that I think I'm gonna start implementing. Because even though I have taken it at night, I can still go to bed, but maybe I'm not getting the most restful sleep.
Mhm.
So,
Could be.
so yeah, so I'll definitely start documenting that, investigating
And if
there.
you're finding that the microdosing, let's say it's not negatively impacting your sleep, and you're finding that it is helpful in kind of quieting the brain, because there are a lot of sleep benefits with microdosing because it quiets down that internal part of the brain that just says the default mode network is most active when we're not focused on something else. So we're quieting that default mode network at the time that we are not focusing on something else, which is what would then allow us to have more restful sleep and be able to fall asleep rather than laying there thinking about all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas from the past and the fears about the future. Instead, it's just kind of let everything go into a stable place of sleep. So if you are specifically finding some benefit to that, consider adding your microdose to some warm tea, where then you are also letting the body know, hey, we're moving into a more restful, peaceful time, preparing for sleep. Warm tea or a warm drink doesn't have to necessarily be tea, but something without caffeine. If you take that before going to bed, it warms the body internally, which does slow everything down, but also promotes digestion. And that starts again moving the body in towards just, oh, we're going into a resetting mode. We're processing what has happened today, we're resting, we're allowing for cellular regeneration, all the great things that happen at night when we stop pushing our body at 100 miles an hour and forcing it to work for us and let it actually regenerate and heal and recuperate and prepare for the next day. So using a warm tea or a warm drink at night with that microdose, maybe it is a little bit earlier, maybe it's around 6 or 7 instead of maybe 8 or 9, can be helpful. The other thing that I have heard a lot of feedback on, because we have chocolate bars that have the psilocybin, is for a lot of people, the chocolate actually makes them kind of tired. And so they'll use the chocolate bar as a little microdose at night, and that kind of just helps them go straight to sleep. Again, everybody's body is different. Other people have said the chocolate really wakes them up and gets them going. So it'd be something to kind of measure for yourself. But whether you're doing your own kind of little concoction with tea or honey or chocolate, or you're using something that you get from Grow Your Own Thoughts, again, have a little bit of curiosity around how it's helpful to your body. Some people describe really vivid dreams when they're microdosing. Again, that's the brain just kind of working through things in a different way and allowing it to sort itself out in a new way. Some people really like dreaming. I've had people say I didn't dream for 10 years and then I started microdosing and I'm dreaming and it's amazing. And other people have said I had nightmares for 10 years and now I'm not dreaming at all and it's amazing. So again, remember your brain knows what it needs. And so we talk about a lot of things on group, and just in this conversation, I've said, well, try that, but if not that, do the complete opposite, because you're finding what works for your body and what's most helpful to you. But yes, maybe taking that dose a little bit early, but also incorporate it with something that lets the body know I'm moving into a state of rest also and reset.
Okay, great idea. Thanks.
Yes. But as far as the amnesia part, there are definitely things We would like to forget. Those of you that have been on group with me before, you've heard me say, we don't do frontal lobotomies anymore, so we don't get to forget the things that have happened. But if we can take the perspective that every experience we have had provides us with information, how we use that information is ultimately how much power we give to that experience. So if we take an experience and say that was super traumatic, that made me feel like crap. I can't believe I'm so weak. I can't believe I got suckered. I can't believe I let somebody treat me like that. Whatever it might be, I can't believe somebody took advantage of me in that way. We have defined that experience as something negative about the self. We've given a lot of power to that experience, back to that emotional response that we have. But with microdosing, if we're able to quiet that default mode network and make things a little less self-referential, a little bit less, what does this mean about me? How does it define me? And more about that was an experience that somebody else created that I was a part of. How can I take that information and use it in a way that's meaningful to me or powerful to me, or sort it away as like, I'm just glad that's over. Personally had an experience in life that occurred in a certain part of a certain city. And every time I went to that part of the city, my stomach would get tied into knots and I would just feel clammy and I would just take the long way. I would just avoid that whole area. And being able to go through that part of town now and maybe have a memory, but have a follow-up thought of like, that was freaking crazy. And not have it mean anything and not hold on to it and instead be able to look at where I am now has given the power back to me and not to the situation or the thing that was outside of my control and or even that, I played a part of in certain aspects at that point in time. But to look at, wow, that feels like someone else's life. Feels like a really bad movie I watched. But this somehow had an ending of redemption and healing and something completely different. Those are the ways that we can really take the power back to ourselves of those things that have happened that have a real unhealthy or fearful or what I'll call negative reminder to them. But we learn from it. There are certain things I will never do again, certain people I will not be involved with again, certain things that I wouldn't allow in my life anymore because of the experiences from that time period. But I also wouldn't wish somebody else to go through it just so they also could have the same education. We all have those things in our lives. So rather than hating the past or wishing it was separate from us, actually make it separate. It doesn't define anything about who you are now or your abilities or your value. Now, what do you want for your life? And that focus of going forward, that's the new reference point. What do I want? And is this decision measuring against what I want going to get me there? And oh, by the way, are these wants what I actually want? Or has that also been inherited and maybe I need to question those as well? I'm seeing some nods and some like, huh, facial responses.
It's just a great way to look at things. You always say, well, I've always said or heard I'm a product of my environment or my upbringing. And yeah, it's played a role. However, it doesn't have to, I love the idea of having it separate. It's just a great outlook.
And it's been my experience while microdosing that it's like it's like a physical experience of it being separate. It's like I was describing it to my husband as sort of like watching a ticker tape go by on the screen. Like it's just, oh, that's a thought. Oh, I don't have to identify with that at all. But it's coming like while microdosing, and even maybe actually especially the day after. Um, it just feels like it feels so physical. It doesn't feel like this mental thing that I'm sort of cogitating. It feels like an actual lived experience of that's just a thought. It's not it's not self-defining, but I can. And then as I get farther from the microdose, it's like I can watch the mm, self-referential framework come back online. It's like, oh yeah, that's what it's like to think about what does this mean to me, or it's like I just watched my sort of like habitual personality come back online, and it's wild to watch that. Yeah, it feels so, like I say, physical, not like a real tangible lived experience, not a mental thing at all.
Mhm. And that's why having the information from our lived experiences is something that we don't want to get rid of. That, when we say we don't want to forget, but we don't want to feel the same about it. Forgetting would be going back to the state of a lack of knowledge for self-preservation purposes. We learn through each thing that we go through. That's how our brain gathers information. And that's what defines that's what the default mode network is. That's what defines that self-referential way of being is the experiences. But we don't realize how many messages we're taking on about ourselves from those experiences that we no longer give thought to or awareness to. So when we look at a personal relationship with a life partner, there's so much that goes into those relationships now that are measured by how does the other person treat me or respond to me. That's that famous line from the movie a while back, you complete me. You don't need to be completed. You're already complete. You are your own person. A healthy relationship is two people being within the relationship that complement and enhance each other, but are not dependent on each other for how they feel about themselves. And that is not like, hey, good luck. That's easy. That is not easy because that's not how we survive. So much of how we survive within society is how are people responding to me? And so think about how we do that on a daily basis. I had someone say to me recently, wouldn't it be great to do a movie about people who, when they leave the house in the morning, a mask goes on their face and it just has a permanent smile on it. And you go through and all you see from other people is this permanent smile and this mask that's put on. So if the Hollywood industry is listening today, we have some great ideas for movies from today's group. But think about how we do that every single day. We all go out with a mask on of some sort, and that mask is designed by how we want people to respond to us, what we want them to think about us. And that is not good or bad, it's just a fact. But we also then take that same mask back home, and then sometimes we usually switch it out with our family members, and especially with our intimate partner, because there's a whole different mask of expectation that goes on at that point in time. Well, you didn't tell me I'm pretty today, so am I not pretty? Are you looking at someone else? Do I need to do something different? Have I gained 5 pounds? Have I lost 5 pounds? Should I have my hair this color, that color? Did I not make dinner right? Whatever. And then for men, it's, oh, they didn't say that, my spouse or partner didn't say they respected me today. Am I not manly enough for you? Do I need bigger biceps? Do I need to cut my hair different, get a different job, have a different title, drive a different car? I mean, it is insanity. When we think about all those thoughts that go through our mind, we don't sit there and think about all these little things, but they just rapid play. We're those of us on group today, I can tell are all of the age where we remember pushing the button on the tape recorder and it just going round and round and then the tape getting caught and it's just like, there's no actual words that were being said on a cassette tape when it got caught. But that's what happens in our brain. It's just the but all through the definitions of how we see ourselves. And then as soon as we interpret that, how do we respond to our partner? Irritated. And usually the partner's like, what is happening right now? Because they weren't thinking any of those things. But that was our interpretation of what was not said, and now we have a issue, an emotional issue. So many relationships go round and round and round in that. And it is 100% self-referential. And it is also 100% inherited belief systems about how someone else should be responding to us. If you don't make me feel a certain way, then we're not compatible, whatever we've defined that to mean. So, and then at some point, if we go down that path far enough of what we're going to call failed relationships, then we decide now we finally say there's something wrong with me. Everyone else on Facebook and Instagram and, quote unquote reality TV has all these amazing relationships, and I don't have a relationship that looks like those pictures and those ideas. So now there's something wrong with me. I'm probably going to be alone. And then we take the idea of being alone, and that has its own definition to it. So, all of these things are fear-based. All of them. The fear of not being thought of as enough or valued, appreciated, purposed. If we can take that fear away and recognize it for, well, it starts with recognizing for what it is a fear first and foremost. And say, I'm not going to let fear define my life, because guess what? 0 healthy decisions are made from a state of fear. Fear creates urgency. This is super uncomfortable, must fix immediately. Therefore, I'm going to make a decision. This relationship is super uncomfortable, tired of it. I don't like the way I feel, so we're done. And then as soon as that decision is made, blood pressure goes down, heart rate goes down, the executive functioning comes back online. And then what happens? And we're like, well, is that really what I want to do? Now I'm not in the state of fear. I can have a little more clarity about it. And that's why relationships go round and round and up and down. Because when that clarity comes back and the fear is mitigated, we see things in a different way. Okay, yeah, I see how I may have contributed to that. I see how my fears played into that. But we have to be willing to go to that place of discomfort of really looking at ourselves and where these ideas come from to be able to have long-lasting permanent change, whether it's within interpersonal relationships, our relationship with ourself, the idea of ourself, family, outside relationships, what we move towards in life, the decisions that we make, how we feel when we watch the news, all these things that are outside of us. When we're constantly looking outside of us to determine what we think about the self, we are using an inappropriate reference. It's just like if we use psilocybin microdosing just to change the way we feel and not to really look at how we think and what we notice, we are also using an inappropriate reference. The way we feel can certainly be in response to what we're noticing, but that's that first point. What am I noticing? And am I willing to be honest with myself about the things I'm noticing instead of being fearful about what it might mean to me or about me? Those healthy relationships, whether it's interpersonal, work, family, wherever it shows up, are based not on how somebody else makes you think or feel about yourself. You are the constant in your own mind, in your own self. And what's really interesting about that is as we recognize that, we automatically free up the people around us to also be themselves. Because that judgment of the reference point has been removed. So as you're microdosing, if you start to see some shifts in the way you think about relationships, friends, family, intimate partners. Don't allow fear to settle into that. Don't be afraid of the things that you're noticing. Fear is connected to those old ideas. Notice things and then decide how you want to respond. And this is not a threat of things are going to get ugly and bad. It's going to be healthier and more genuine. Go ahead, Melanie.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I'm thinking what's coming to me a lot as you're saying this is your invitation to trust the natural self. And I'm appreciating what you're saying about noticing. I have noticed quite a bit. And I have noticed fear and the sense of I don't know. It's like I don't know who I am without all these habitual, and I mean, there has been fear, but there's also just been a sort of curiosity, like I just literally don't know. And then your invitation to trust your natural self feels like, oh, but I could find out. I could just sort of like be here and see what happens. Yeah, let the natural self, yeah, it's an observation. See what happens. Yeah.
That's what a newborn baby does. That's how we all started at one point in time.
Yeah.
But now we have all this information that we can look at objectively to make those decisions about ourself and what we want and how we go forward. So I love that recognition. That trusting your natural self is exactly what gives you permission to be your natural self and to find out what is authentic to you.
Yeah, to find out what is authentic to me. Mm-hmm. Yes, a discovery process.
Exactly. Any other thoughts that are kind of coming up or that anybody wants to share as we start to move towards closing out our time today? This has been a great discussion.
I just really appreciate, I just need to be and not, I love, and I'm taking notes. That's why my head is down. But what am I noticing? And then how do I respond? Like, that's just it. Like, what am I noticing? And then not label it or not think that I have to feel a certain way from what I'm noticing. I think that's really big.
Absolutely. And as you notice things, kind of a follow-up thought as you go a little bit deeper into that is, where did this come from? Because that's that peeling back the layers of where that modified state of being has come from.
That's great.
Whether we're talking about fear or something we're recognizing about ourselves, when you notice it's a fear, if that does come up, then what is the fear? What actually is the fear? If the fear is, just to use the relationship idea, being alone, well, then why am I so afraid of being alone? What definitions do I have about the idea of not having a significant partner that create a lack in me that's been put there? And then what do I do with that? So same with other belief systems. When this, okay, well, I'm afraid of this. Well, how is that fear serving me? Is it really keeping me alive or is it costing me? It's keeping me alive if it is directly attached to the preservation of my physical body. But if it's not attached to the preservation of my physical body, it is literally just an idea that has been culturally or societally inherited.
That's what I was going to say. Why am I thinking it's even a fear? Who
Right.
calls it fear? Why and why?
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other final thoughts today?
Yes, I just want to ask a practical question.
Yeah.
So I've heard you say that I think I've heard you say that there's no need to take breaks. You can microdose several times a day, if desired, or if it seems appropriate before 6 p.m. If it's sleep concerning. And also, like, there's no need to take breaks day by day. One can, but one doesn't need to. Can you speak more to that? I've heard from other sources that a tolerance does develop, so it's new. This is new
Yeah,
to me, the concept.
absolutely. So when I look at information, anything that you hear from me is based off of experience with a large number of people. I've worked with over 1,000 people microdosing, and that's partly why you also hear me say, maybe, maybe not, try this, try that, because we are all unique and individual. One thing that has been consistent though, and that also makes sense with science and how the body works, is over time you need less psilocybin, not more. That right there shows this is not a physiological dependence or tolerance that is being induced. Otherwise, we would need more and more and more to get said response. Instead, psilocybin is a healing modality. Number one, again, back to that half-life, 2 hours and 43 minutes. Even if you decide you're going to go do a major macro journey and take 10 grams of psilocybin mushrooms, that is going to be metabolized through your system in a very short amount of time as far as the active ingredient of the psilocin within the mushroom itself. Now, there will be continuing cognitive benefits beyond that because that's how psilocybin works. But with microdosing, again, we're going back to we're taking a very small dose. It's definitely metabolized through the body within, a few hours, certainly within a 24-hour time period. And it is a healing modality. So an example that I give is for me, I've microdosed for over 4 years now. I don't microdose every day anymore. I might microdose a few times one week and then not at all for 3 to 4 weeks and then a day here or there. I understand how it's a tool for me and I know when it's helpful. And my microdose, though, is the same amount. It is still just level or just under level of one little scoop, 0.05 of a gram. That's my microdose. However, I've worked with other individuals who have microdosed a gram or more on a daily basis. And over time, it goes down. 3/4 of a gram, 0.3 of a gram, starting to skip days, not needing to microdose every day, maybe not even microdosing at all after a while. It is a healing modality. We are resetting the default mode network. So when we talk about the idea of amnesia or frontal lobotomies and changing, the whole goal is to change the way that we think about things. That has been shown on MRI imaging. That is science. Science shows, MRI imaging shows that when psilocybin is introduced, that default mode network quiets down and over time it resets. If we are resetting the way that we think for enhancing neuroplasticity, new neural connection, new ways of thinking, that's why group and intentional awareness and conscious thought about your thoughts is so important. It's not just take the mushroom and go about your day. It is what are you noticing? What is changing? How is thought itself changing for you? Because that's connected to the outcomes and our behaviors are changing, our lives are changing. Well, when you get to that place, you're not forever changing. That's not the goal with psilocybin. It's you are getting now to a place of you are living from your natural, authentic self, making decisions based off of what you want and going forward in a more intentional, conscious way. So I don't need to back my car out of the garage and down my little, 50-foot driveway to go to the mailbox. That would be a waste of energy of starting the car, backing it down, going to the mailbox, pulling right back up. I have your normal suburbia driveway. Instead, I just walk down and get the mail and come back. Same with the way that we live. we don't need to continue using psilocybin as a healing modality tool when the healing has happened. Now we use it as an adjunct because we still live in this world, we still live on this planet, we still have lots of things happening around us, we still absorb information, but we're more aware of it and we understand how it's a helpful tool for us. So that's a long answer to the question of why you can microdose every single day, but over time you're going to need less, not more. But there's no tolerance that's being built up. You don't need to skip days unless the way your body is responding or your mind is responding says, hey, every other day is more helpful to me. Just a little tiny dose every other day or something like that. That's why I say listen to your body. Trust your natural self as you're going through this process.
Thank you. That is super helpful.
Yeah.
That really reframes how I'm looking at this. Thank you.
You're welcome. Once again, that recommendation is based off of information attached to other things, attached to pharmaceuticals, attached to sugar, attached to caffeine, attached to things that are addictive. Psilocybin has been shown to be not addictive. So a tolerance is built with things that an addiction can be created for or created from, just like anything that we would classify as addictive. Tolerance is built. You need more and more and more and more to get the same dopamine benefits, get the same effects. Nobody wants to do a big dose of or a big dose of mushrooms for mental health or therapeutic purposes, and then the next day say, "Yeah, I want to do that again." That's not how mushrooms work for therapeutic purposes, again, or even for untherapeutic. So if you go to Burning Man, those of you listening outside this conversation and you're doing lots of mushrooms at Burning Man, that's one thing. But again, you don't live that way. You don't come back and then say, now I need to keep doing massive doses of mushrooms all the time. So whether it's experiential or therapeutic, it's just not how psilocybin works within the brain. So, but it's connected, again, to belief systems and old information. If all these things the body develops a tolerance to, then these things they must develop a tolerance to. One other thing just to note on that is that with large doses of mushroom, there is a significant disruption to the serotonin system. Our brain is in the head to keep the body alive. It is a central control system of the nervous system and everything else connected within the body for physical survival. When we take something that significantly disrupts one of the systems, the brain is going to make some automatic accommodations for that. Oh, that was kind of crazy. Even if I took something away from it, I need to make sure that we're not significantly disrupted as much as possible. So for individuals that do large doses on a regular basis, they may find that they need to increase that dose. That is because it is a significant disruption within the serotonin system, not because they're developing a tolerance, particularly when we're talking about using such a small amount on a daily basis. So again, just to set those two things apart. If someone says, I used to take 2 grams and have an experience, and now I have to take 5, that is very different than I used to microdose, 0.1 of a gram, and now I have to take 0.5. Those are not apples to apples. Those two things do not correlate. Any other questions specific to microdosing or dosage or any expectations or things along those lines as we wrap up? All right. Well, I certainly appreciate all of you being here today. I really enjoyed the conversation. I believe that our listening audience will also find it helpful. I'll go ahead and get the recording ended for those of you that are listening. If you do want to participate in person with one of these groups, you can find all of our groups at growyourownthoughts.org on the calendar on the homepage. We would love to have you join.